Once again, it all comes back to Ethan. It's all because these guys are hating on Ethan. It's nothing that Ethan did to make these people's feelings bad. It's that they changed their feelings to attack Ethan. I think this is a response to Ethan's tweet. Let's check it out.
Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about this once and then we're moving on. I posted a video today about a podcast appearance that I was on 2 years ago, and although I did not disclose the name or the podcast that I was on, the viewers have figured it out. So I wanted to address the comments and questions in the recent Instagram post that Ethan Klein made about me a few minutes ago. This is a deeply personal and important topic for me, so I wanted to take some time to set the record straight and share my side of the story. There's been a lot of conversation from Ethan Klein's fans about me trying to clout chase by sharing this story, which again, never mentioned his name, and that I'm trying to capitalize off of Ethan's current situation. That couldn't be further from the truth, so I wanted to make this video to explain everything in full context. In 2022, I was a listener of a podcast, and there was one episode where they were talking about phobias and fears of little people and proper wording for people with dwarfism. At the time, they were using slurs that most of us know are not appropriate, but I figured it would be a great opportunity to see if I could get on the show to talk about the proper verbiage and to educate people on dwarfism.
They knew it was not appropriate, but they used it anyway, because once again, they get off on being politically incorrect, but pretending like they just don't know, and they're operating in this space of, I need to criticize this person, I need to correct this person, but I'm going to use the same bigoted language they're using.
Someone with dwarfism myself who experiences in-person and online harassment just because of the fact that I have a disability, I was hoping that this appearance would help bridge the gap of understanding and start some meaningful dialogue. Unfortunately, during the episode, I was subjected to ableist jokes and comments about little people that made me really uncomfortable. I kept my composure and smiled at the time. It was really hurtful, to be honest. I didn't even know how to process it in the moment, except for doing what I do best, which is putting a smile on things and trying to spin it in a positive direction. Immediately afterwards, I emailed the crew asking if I could come back on the show during a live segment to talk about what I wanted to talk about in the first place, because I was worried that just the segment we had filmed would leave a bad taste in people's mouths and make them assume that I was part of this joke that I was never keyed in on. So I was on the show again a few days later after the segment we had pre-filmed aired, and they played it again and then had me come on to talk about it, and I just stayed positive because I was hoping that if I was positive and I was focusing on the good, that people would forget about the segment essentially. I was hoping that by focusing on kindness and grace and showing empathy, that would go farther and people would remember me by that as opposed to what happened during that segment. Then and the crew talked on the show, that episode, the live one, about how they had to edit a lot of stuff down, so I hope that maybe one day they'll release the full video so that you can see all of the jokes that I was subjected to that didn't even make it into the final cut. After the episode and the days following, I posted on the subreddit thanking the host and the crew for having me on because I wanted to focus on the positives, which was that the audience was actually really lovely to me, and I think really understood the message that I was trying to convey, despite having to fight people who just were refusing to see my humanity during that. I didn't want to stir controversy because I had no followers on the internet at the time, and this podcast and the host had millions of followers, and I also hadn't fully processed what had happened since the segment just had come out. So I figured if I stayed kind and positive, that people would focus on the educational purpose of my appearance as opposed to everything else. As time went on though, I reflected on that experience more and more. I realized that these ableist jokes weren't just one-off harmless jokes. They were a part of a larger pattern of influencers on YouTube and social media using their platforms to perpetuate harmful jokes and ideologies about little people. I never once in my time since then have mentioned Ethan by name or the podcast by name or encouraged people to figure out what it is, but I have talked about this in depth.
I mean, I know this is supposed to be a political episode, but the comparisons between what Ethan Klein is doing with this guy and little people is so similar to what he's been doing with Gaza, where every now and then he'll mention like, oh, I donated $2,500 to Palestine, and you say that I'm anti-Palestinian, and you say that I'm pro-genocide, and I'm a Zionist. I donated $2,500 there. How can I be a Zionist? I support Palestinians. But what is the rhetoric that he's been doing this entire time? He's been defending an ethno-state.
And I put my money where my mouth is, okay? I donated $6,500 to the Gazan fund to help them.
You know, I got a lot of from Israelis for donating because they're like, oh, it's just going to go to Hamas. But, you know, well, you want to raise money for Palestine? Okay,
I already donated money to Palestine. What have you done for Palestine? I've done so much more for Palestine than you have on paper, right? I donated $7,000 to Gaza Relief. Did you know that?
I mean, look, dude, you're a Zionist, though, bro. Like,
I donated. Why would I donate?
They don't want that from you, bro.
I think I've done a lot more for Palestine, and I think that it's important that the world knows that. And ultimately, who's the Zionist? I think you're the Zionist.
He's been defending the ethno-state of Israel the entire time. It's the exact same with this guy. He brings him on as a joke, and he's literally a punchline to a joke of the Jimmy Lee comedian segment. Brings him on as a punchline to a joke, and then he brings him on again because Aubrey realized that was a complete joke of an appearance. I didn't get my message across at all that we need to respect little people. And literally the end of the joke is Jimmy Lee making a joke about how he's gonna throw up now, either because he had to interact with a little person or because he was so embarrassed. That's the end of the segment that they showed. And so Aubrey rightly is like, can I come on to actually try to educate people about this minority group that you have been platforming the bigotry of? And Ethan's like, okay. And Ethan's like, all right, give me your plug for your website and for your show, and then give me your little spiel. And he's like, well, can I educate you any more about little people? And Ethan's like, I just think it's crazy that people are harassing you. All right, bye now. And then Ethan goes on to be like, oh, well, is that the M word? Is that the correct terminology? Or is it munchkin or little people or dwarfs? And he goes on, and he doesn't change anything. But if he ever gets called out on being bigoted towards little people, he can say, well, I had this one guy on this one time, so why are you saying that I'm bigoted? I had him on one time. It's the exact same thing with Palestine. Donated once, and now he can be as Zionist as he wants, but he has that excuse. He brought a little person on once to advocate for about 2 minutes, and now he can be like as flippant as he wants about when discussing the proper labels of little people.
Now Ethan is claiming that he has proof that I was okay with the appearance, and people are upset because I've deleted the posts today on Reddit and Instagram celebrating the appearance. And that's honestly just because those posts don't accurately represent how I feel, and I feel that they're being used to invalidate my experiences and to ignore the fact that there was a lot of ableist rhetoric going on, that the segment was harmful, regardless if people think it was a joke or not, and that those posts are not proof of anything, but those moments right after the podcast where I was trying to stay positive and pivot in a more positive direction. For those calling me a clout chaser or saying that I'm hopping on a hate train because the host is currently under some controversy, that is just so far from the truth. I've been speaking about this for years now, and never once mentioned the name or the podcast, which would be something you would do if you were looking for clout. This is about advocating for fairness and respect, not about hating or canceling people. I understand that fans of the podcast may feel defensive or upset, but I urge you to see it from my perspective as someone who is subjected to hurtful language about literally my body and the way it looks every single day, and then to have that put into a video form with 1.1 million views as of today. Just because one audience might see a set of jokes, funny or harmless, doesn't negate the fact that they can be harmful to the larger disability community. There is no timeline for when you're allowed to feel uncomfortable by a situation where, regardless if you want to admit it, ableism was perpetuated. And I think especially at the time, I think it's a very normal experience for people to have to sometimes freeze up in the moment and go, I'm just going to play along because I just want to get out of the situation and I don't want this to be forever how people perceive me. Which again explains why I was trying to be so positive afterwards and thankful. I never want to burn bridges with anybody, which is why I thanked the crew, still thank the podcast host for allowing me the opportunity to come on.
So I just want to make the point that like it is so incomprehensible to me that Ethan Klein will say, you made a post thanking me for this appearance. Thus, what you are saying now about how you feel about the appearance is a lie. And you are just jumping on a bandwagon of hatred against me. It's not that you made the post to try to maintain a relationship with me, which is like the biggest show and the most exposure he's had, at least in his YouTube career, like for sure. It's not that. It's not that you made those Reddit posts so that you could actually try to come on to the podcast itself to have a real conversation about dwarfism and how it's being represented in your podcast specifically and YouTube in general. It's not any of that. It's that you were genuinely happy, and you still genuinely are happy that you went on to my podcast, but now you were just lying by saying that you felt you were being discriminated against on my show, and you are just doing that for clout and because a lot of people are hating me right now. So like, it's so crazy. It's literally, I mean, it's not literally the same thing, but it is the same type of thing that conservatives will do when they say that women coming out and saying that they were sexually assaulted by usually it's a conservative person, by a conservative person, are just doing so because that person has a lot of hatred. Why didn't you come out earlier? Why did you say that it was consensual then, and now you're saying that it's non-consensual? You were just lying for clout. You're just lying because all of these people are coming out against this person and you're trying to take them down. It's invalidating the idea that people can take time to kind of internalize and come to face their emotions about a certain issue. Like, obviously, when you are faced with extreme bigotry on a show that you were expecting to come on and educate people, you're not going to immediately be able to process the emotions that are going through you right now. And in the immediate aftermath, of course, you're going to say, I had a great time on this show. Can I please come on and promote my stuff more? Please come on in a different circumstance and actually talk about the very real challenges that little people are facing. So it is a very reactionary thing that Ethan's doing by invalidating Aubrey's emotions and his feelings about this podcast, saying that, well, you made a post 2 years ago and now you're contradicting that post, thus you are lying now, even though you're telling me how you feel now. What you're saying now is a lie, and I'm going to go off of this post you made 2 years ago when you're still trying to promote your brand and still trying to like come on to my podcast. So yes, it's invalidating his opinions. It's a very reactionary mindset, and it is extremely self-centered by Ethan. He cannot imagine the idea that his show was actually promoting bigotry. He cannot imagine the idea that a guest came on to his show and had a poor experience on his show and felt discriminated against because of the bigotry that Ethan Klein is allowing to be on his show. No, it's the fact that he said he had a great time on the podcast in the past, thus that is correct, and now when he's coming out and saying that he didn't have a good time on the podcast, that must be a lie, and he's just doing it so he can attack attack me. Once again, it all comes back to Ethan. It's all because these guys are hating on Ethan. It's nothing that Ethan did to make these people's feelings bad. It's that they changed their feelings to attack Ethan. So it's extremely reactionary. It's extremely invalidating of this guy's feelings. Of course, this segment was bigoted, and it's insanely self-centered. That's why I can never, like, I do not have a big ego, and I would never imagine that I'm correct over the feelings of someone when they're telling me their feelings. That is just so insane to me. But that's just the size of Ethan's ego that we're talking about here.
Some people are also asking, why didn't you tell him you were uncomfortable? Why didn't you tell him to take the video down? And I would encourage you to think about power dynamics and how those come into play when someone like me, who's already marginalized and harassed and made fun of on the internet, who has no platform, telling someone with millions of followers to take a video down. And I'm gonna tell you, I did say that I was uncomfortable with the episode that we filmed, which is why I wanted to come back on again to kind of start anew. How many times have you been at your job and maybe your boss or manager has said something to you that you have not agreed with or not felt comfortable with, but you didn't feel like you could tell them directly, hey, don't do that again, please? Power dynamics are a real thing, especially when it comes to influential figures. I thank the people who continue to fight against ableism. It means the world to me knowing that so many of you care so deeply about things like this and want to see an equal and inclusive world for all where nobody would find jokes about phobias of disabled people in our bodies appropriate or comedic or something that should be platformed. And despite the comments on Reddit being made about me in an ableist way, despite the DMs and messages that I'm getting and comments on these videos, I encourage you to move with kindness in response to them because there's not going to be any good done by fighting fire with fire. I love you guys. Keep going.
Yeah, so, and Aubrey is extremely based, and I agree with him a lot. That was his response. Oh, shoot, I kind of wanted to read the comments on there. Okay, here we go. Response from Aubrey, this one. We read a little bit of the comments here. He says, he deleted that post. Damn, he's really trying to hide how fickle he is. Why is that so funny? And deleted this Reddit post. Can still see the title and comments on it, though. God, why people do this? Is the H3 Clout that good? And why they always do this when the pod is on a break? It's just cowardly behavior. Man, his audience is so far gone right now. I'm unclear what exactly he thought was going to occur, but I don't think he was the joke. Gary and Jimmy were the joke, not to mention that Gary and Jimmy are old men who are openly not PC. No one is going to educate them on anything. Kind of seems like he's just trying to cash in on Ethan's crash out. So that's so funny. First of all, cash in what way? He made, what, 2 TikToks? How much money can you actually get from there? And second of all, he's literally saying they are 2 old men who are not going to be educated on anything. Then why bring on a little person to educate them on dwarfism? So he's literally like contradicting himself in the middle of the sentence. Yeah, that's kind of the problem with satire. We often see people use satire as a shield to just dog whistle whatever their bigoted opinion is, that when actual satire happens, it's genuinely hard to discern. This isn't satire. They literally brought a little person on to 2 old that are shitting on little people. Like, from our perspective, Jimmy, Lee, and Gary are the joke. Obviously, to us, what they say is so absurdly out there that it wraps past being effed up to platform and back to it being comedy. But if you aren't in on the joke, you're just watching 2 old men. Yeah, I mean, that's literally what happened. And you can say, this is what I was talking about, how Ethan Klein gets off on the idea where he's laughing at bigotry, but what he is really doing is platforming bigotry. And he exists in this space where he can be bigoted because he's just restating what the bigoted people are saying. So he's not saying that little people are magical and there's like dwarves versus M words. He's just stating that that's what people believe, right? And that's exactly what he does about Israel and Palestine too. He'll say like, well, I don't think that if we got rid of the borders, all of the Israelis would die, all of the Jewish Israelis would die. I'm just saying that that's what they think. I'm just restating that all Israelis think that Palestinians are subhuman. I'm not saying they're subhuman.
Okay, so listen, I'll concede that it's possible as a result of what happened in apartheid South Africa. But in Israel, as it is now, I don't think you could convince a single Israeli that removing the blockade and borders checkpoints wouldn't result in immediate violence against them. That's why I believe it's a non-starter. I don't think you'll ever convince Israel to basically dissolve their state and remake it as one state. I just don't think Israel would ever do that, ever. That will never happen. And I say this not from a right or wrong perspective. I'm just saying this from pragmatically. I know Israelis. I've lived in Israel. That will never happen, short of all out war. They'll never give up the country, ever. It will never. It's a 0% chance. There is, I believe, a widespread belief held by nearly every Israeli that if the borders would dissolve, if the borders would come down, there would be a massive genocide against Jews. And that, they believe that. And I don't know necessarily to what extent that might be true. I can tell you for sure that that's what they hear when they think one state is basically a bunch of Israelis being massacred. That's what they hear. That's what they see. And that's why it will never happen. And I want to emphasize, I'm not moralizing anything I'm talking about. I'm just from pragmatics. That's the perception in Israel. That's what they think, and you cannot convince them otherwise. You can't. By the way, and I just need to make this clear because you keep saying that you support the moralistic thing. I support the moralistic thing too. I'm talking pragmatics here. I'm telling you, yes, the one state is a non-starter. That's my point. I don't know what people are saying. saying, but I can only imagine.
Well, don't pay attention
and
to what
by the way,
people are saying. Don't pay attention to what people are saying.
if there's people watching this who are just seething, I'm just telling you what I'm explaining to you is what it is, and I believe that people need to reckon with the reality of the situation.
I
I'm
agree on
not
that.
saying this to defend Israel. I'm saying it because I'm just telling you why people are uncomfortable
Okay.
with that phrase, from the river to the sea, because
I
they
know.
interpret its use like what this guy's saying, which is that from the river to the sea, said Israel will be destroyed, and there'll be no Jews left in the region. I'm just telling you the Jewish perspective. That's why people don't.
No,
When they hear
first
from
of all,
the
you're
river
not
to
telling
the
me
sea,
this perspective. You're telling me.
I'm telling you because Jews, I know they're talking about Israel, but when Jews around the world hear someone say Israel shouldn't exist from the river to the sea, which is how it's interpreted, they see that, again, I keep bringing this up, they see it as a genocide.
Okay. I'm not putting words in your mouth. You're putting words in
I'm
your
explaining to you why people find it offensive. That's it. It's offensive to the vast majority of Jews. I'm telling you, if I try to explain the perspective of a Jewish or Israeli person, I'm not endorsing it, I'm not defending it, I'm only saying it because I think it's important for people to understand the perspectives of those on the other side of them so that you can connect with them better. I feel like a lot of people can't differentiate between like real Zionist, propagandist, psychotic freaks and then someone like me who's a, secular, modern, unreligious, and concerned Jewish person, Israeli, that's concerned about what's happening to the Palestinian people.
He's such a fucking coward, dude. This is what Ethan Klein does all the time. So this is the Reddit post. Aubrey, the person with dwarfism who called in, thank you to Ethan, the crew, and everyone in chat for being so welcoming and respectful, and shout out to Cam for the editing. If anybody wants to donate to our film, we have 60. So yes, he was literally promoting his film in this shout out. Okay, so then we can read the comments here. I never said the name of the podcast. Brother, you aren't a super famous celebrity. I think this pretty much narrows it down to one or maybe two appearances. I mean, you'd only really know this if you're a fan of H3. It's fine for them to be uncomfortable with it later on. They just didn't need to lie about small details in the first video. What are the small details? Seen a few comments making fun of their dwarfism on here. Why are they using like them and their? Is that Aubrey's pronouns? Like, it's totally fine if he doesn't like Ethan in the show anymore and maybe even regrets what's going on, but it's also fine to say you did have a positive experience but no longer are a fan. You don't have to lie and reframe the appearances to say you don't approve of Ethan. What? First of all, he didn't say he doesn't approve of Ethan anymore. He just says that he does not think that was a positive appearance anymore. This is insane. This is a symptom of people not in the H3 universe just seeing post that. I'm not even going to read that. That was really stupidly written. Agreed, but it also works the other way. Too many in this community will blindly defend what could be a learning moment and instead create an echo chamber. Dude, Ethan and his crew were literally using slurs. This is like, Ethan does have a history of like using slurs against little people. We can just find it pretty easily. Like, what is this? Okay, I'm done. That was horrible. I mean, and then there was that clip with Bobby Lee. Yes, he has a history of using slurs. He lied about his experience, and then people called him out for lying about it because the show is still available and everyone can see he is lying. That no one on the crew made fun of him, and he had an interview on the show having a great time, and days after made posts here on Reddit and Instagram about his positive experience on the pod. Dude, this is like a schizo post. What is happening? Where's the punctuation? This person is like in a manic state. Just like insane run-on sentences. Yeah, and then they're just pointing out I wasn't clout chasing because I didn't name them. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, they're not actually addressing what he had to say at all. They're just saying, man, they're really just saying he's clout chasing. Seems like they just couldn't resist getting newfound attention. I tried to go screen cap because I noticed he was deleting other stuff. I don't care too much about this situation, but I think people should remember that people can change their feelings about things. He might have thought it was wonderful at the time, but with time felt differently. It could have also gone the opposite way too. So just because he was fine with it before doesn't mean much now. But that's not what he's claiming. He's not claiming he thought it was a wonderful experience at the time, but looking back, he realized he was just a butt of a joke. He's claiming he knew he was a butt of the joke right then and there because he said he wanted to cuss them out, but didn't because he's a class act. Yeah, that's true. But then he had a decent appearance afterwards where he thought he actually made some kind of push. Oh my God. These people are actually insane. How are you even defending this?